Welcome into today's Wednesday edition of Dropping Dimes. I'm your host, Matt Nost. You can follow me anywhere at Matt Nost. So the Lakers take a commanding 3-1 lead in the series so far. And as per usual on these shows, if you want to jump in on the chat, there's an email. If you want to jump in on the show, there's an email address, droppingdimeshow@gmail.com. And just hit me up over there and I could send you the link and then you could jump in, give your 2 cents, and then I'll drop you out. But otherwise you can leave comments over on the side. So last night's game was the KCP show. I love it. KCP shows up game 1, not really there. Game 2, game 3 shows up game 4. That's kind of KCP's rhythm. Is he has a good game, and then he has like 2 meh, and then 1 to 2 rather meh games, and then he comes back with another one where it was the KCP game. I mean, he went 3 for 8 from 3, but it really felt like he hit more because he was making the threes when they really needed them. His plus minus was second best on the team, only behind Anthony Davis. It was better than LeBron's, although no one is, remotely saying that he's more important or, was a bigger, more vital piece for last night's win than LeBron's. But, in the previous game, they got big games from Markieff and Kuzma. And on the outside looking at it, just like, oh, well, if those two chip in that much, it's an automatic W for the Lakers. But AD was kind of non-existent in game 3 with the early foul trouble. And then when he got back in, he just wasn't in a rhythm, wasn't demanding the ball, wasn't inflicting his will upon the Heat when they have nobody to truly match up against him. And in this game, you got a great performance from AD on the offensive and the defensive side. You got a great performance from LeBron. So then you just need one of the other guys to kind of show up. And they did with KCP. So there you go. I mean, it was a hell of a game. My biggest takeaway from it is if the Lakers are going to sag that much off of you on the perimeter, Jimmy, you need to make him pay more. He looked tentative. They easily figured out he much prefers to drive to his right than any other side. So they were trying to hedge and force him to his left as much as they could. But they were sagging off of him on the 3-point line by 4 or 5 feet as if he's, Ben Simmons. And he went over 3 from 3. So they did the right thing. He's not a good 3-point shooter. Just late in the game, it was really that screen handoff to Tyler Hero. And please, Tyler, do something. We need the offensive output that you can help create because I don't know if Jimmy felt he was too taxed or the defense was too keyed in on him. But it was so many just little screen pick thing with a handoff to Hero. And then Hero, we need you to cook up at the top of the circle to make it happen. The Heat's offense was really stagnant at times. I mean, in the half court, they looked like the Celtics did against them, where I didn't trust the Celtics after a while to get a bucket in the half court offense. They needed to create so much in transition for the confusion to enable themselves to get a shot up. The Heat fell into that stagnation as well last night. I mean, here's where the absence of Goran Dragic really hurts them because he's the guy that can drive in and make the defense collapse like a good ball handler. And then if the defense does collapse, he can do a lob to Bam or a kick out. And Jimmy's good at that, but when he is the primary, it's just not enough for their offense. Sebastian over in the chat says, well, I'm sad the NBA will more than likely be over after Friday. I will at least be ecstatic about the Lakers bringing home another chip. I'm in agreement on half of that. I think the worst case for the Lakers is Sunday. And who knows, the Heat could show up. And it's not like the Heat were drummed out of this game. It was back and forth. The Lakers held the momentum for the game. They were dictating the pace by and large for the bulk of it. But the Heat were never really truly out of it until very late in the game. Just the Lakers were hitting like that AD 3 to seal it was the icing on the cake, but they were hitting shots late in the fourth quarter, and the Heat just weren't. It was, there were all these slight missed opportunities where the Heat would force a bad shot or get a turnover and then not be able to capitalize, and would come back and the Lakers get it too. And it was that over and over and over again. The Heat weren't able to fully capitalize on all the mistakes, all the small mistakes that the Lakers were making, and they have to force the Lakers into those mistakes and then take advantage of as many of them as they possibly can to steal a victory, because they've evened out the rebounding advantage that the Lakers had in the first couple games. I mean, it was relatively non-existent last night. It was a fairly even match, and they didn't have the disparity in second chance points like they did in the first couple games. So once you neutralize a couple of those things, you're like, all right, the Heat have a real shot in this game. I still think Duncan Robinson needs to shoot more. He was 3 of 6, and I got a sneeze coming on eventually here. He was 3 of 6 from behind three. But if I'm Duncan Robinson, or if I'm Spoelstra and everybody else on there, it's just like, you have to continue to shoot, even if it's a bad shot. We need you to continue to shoot. A, because you're our best perimeter three-point shooter, and B, if Jimmy is hesitant to shoot from outside, which rightly he should be, he's not a good three-point shooter, he's not a good distance shooter, we need that to extend the defense out to create the driving lanes for him to get in, and for Hero as well. Which kudos to Mark Jackson for one of the worst lines in the history of basketball last night, that Hero is not only a sandwich. It's like, oh my God. And I heard that on the broadcast, and they were cutting to a commercial right there, but the stone cold silence from Breen and Van Gundy, which is what they always do. Whoever it is, whether it's Jackson or Van Gundy, they get to say their piece or whatever, and then it cuts straight to commercial, and the other two guys don't say anything. But in that instance, they really needed to add some type of like jovial laugh, whatnot. But to have it go starkly silent for 2 seconds and then cut to a commercial just made it even more of a terrible, awkward line. God, that was brutal. But, I was texting with like Fernandez and a few other guys, but Fernandez was the one that I said it to. Heroes, I like his confidence. Even when he's missing, I still like his confidence, and he definitely needs to keep shooting as much as he can. I think he had one fewer shot than Jimmy last night, but those two are going to be the primaries of their offense, and they really need to continue doing that, especially with Bam just now coming back in and played a decent game. I can look up the final stats. So Bam ended with 15 points, 7 boards, an assist, and a steal, 3 turnovers, 4 fouls. So the 3 turnovers, 4 fouls, not ideal. And Jimmy had, almost had another triple double, but the 0 for 3 from 3 and his complete and utter hesitancy to shoot it. When they're going under on every screen and you're not making them pay for it in the slightest, at the very least, if that were to continue to happen, send everybody in to rebound and just have Jimmy shoot, thereby making them not be able to go under screens anymore and go over the top. And then potentially you can catch them in a roll situation or run a drag screen. Run maybe a drag screen with Bam and Duncan Robinson, where, one pops out to the 3-point line, the other rolls to the basket, and Jimmy now has options, but you need to get them to not sag under the screen. Needs to get them to fight through and try and go over the top. Then it makes the roll a little bit more effective going in to the paint. But from the Lakers, man, so I wonder, watching the game, because the body language from LeBron looks pretty terrible a lot of the times. It'd be one thing if he were Jordan or he were Kobe and that mean mugging was what he did all the time. So it's to be expected. So I think it has to be more demoralizing when this guy that wants to create this atmosphere of bonhomie and we're all a band of brothers and we're in this together, when he is mean mugging like Kuzma, he mugs at Kuzma whenever Kuzma does the slightest thing wrong, and Kuzma will not make eye contact with him. And it affects, his body language thereafter. Now Kuzma is taken to next time down the court, like it happened last time, and he immediately shoots and he's making buckets and it kind of regains his confidence. But if he missed that immediate shot after he gets mugged from LeBron, my guess is his confidence will go in the toilet for the rest of the game. And it's just so weird for a guy that has this jovial nature and, wants to be the consummate teammate of building his guys up, the positive reinforcement versus the negative, to then see him go fully negative when anybody does anything that isn't 100% perfect. It's just so jarring to see. I wonder if it has any effect. I know that there's a story that after last season, Rondo pulled LeBron aside and was like, you can't do this to the young guys. They've been idolizing you since they were kids. You've been in this league so long and been, an apex predator for the duration of their basketball lives, to then have you chastise them publicly like this will destroy them. And I think if they were, if he had been Jordan this whole time, then they would have expected it. So it's fine. But to see the atmosphere that he's created on all the different teams that he's had over the years, and then to turn around, and I realize it's the finals and the stakes are the highest they're going to be, legacy for him and for, the burgeoning legacy for AD and pride and reputations and all that are on the line. But I just got to imagine it's jarring, especially for somebody like Kuzma. I think he's the one that takes it to heart the most. I know, like, LeBron stared down Caruso at one point, but Caruso has the fiery intensity. And also, if ever there's any kind of mistake, like Caruso got a T last night because he thought he got fouled. Just like, okay, dial it down a notch, Caruso. If Duncan Robinson isn't getting the foul calls when he's getting hammered on threes, I don't know that you should be getting them either. You guys are roughly in the same position as far as NBA, hierarchies. Perhaps Caruso is a little bit higher, but at the same time, it's not like the degree between the two of you is so wide that you should be able to get away with jawing at the refs like you do. But if LeBron comes in hard on Caruso, I think Caruso takes it as constructive. So just having the touch with different guys. But, that's an outsider's perspective looking in. I have no idea. I could be 100% wrong on that. Perhaps that's the type of motivation that Kuzma needs, and LeBron knows it. And, it's hard to question a guy when his basketball IQ is that high. What was it, like 2 finals ago? Yeah, it was 2 finals ago, and a reporter asked LeBron about one specific sequence, and he gave 3 minutes straight of possessions. It was like at the start of the second half or something, and he was like, oh, yeah, that one? Well, the reason that happened is because, and then he goes through the prologue of everything that happened before that play that led up to, and then the aftermath of that play. It's just like anybody that has the Rolodex of the game in their head like that definitely has, a basketball IQ higher than the average player, and one of the best that I've ever seen. So outsider's perspective looking in, but Kuzma's body language at times looks terrible. And I think only LeBron exacerbates that. Whether or not it's intended, I have no idea. So Octane, great name, over in the chat writes, what do you think of Duncan Robinson? Lights out at 3, but can't dribble and not great on defense. I mean, he definitely olayed. He did a little James Harden olay. But like that almost block on KCP, he was close. Look, KCP is quicker than him. There's just no 2 ways around it. But the layup by KCP, and he went up and he just lofted. Duncan Robinson was a fractional amount of time off of being able to get a piece on that. I mean, he's not atrocious. He's definitely not a good defender, But at the same time, like, he's so young that it's hard to really ding him because he hasn't blossomed into whatever player he's going to become. So, will he ever be a burgeoning, borderline, all defensive player? It certainly doesn't look like it. He just doesn't have the athleticism to stay in front of guys like that. But can he be a competent defender? Sure. And can he dribble? Well, the fact of the matter is, what was it? Game 2? Was it game 2 or game 3 where he was making layup after layup after layup after the previous, throughout the entire playoff runs? I don't know if he had it to. He just consistently shot from 3. So he doesn't, it's not like he has a Jimmy level or hero level type of handle, but I think it's something he could work on and he could eventually get to. But right now, he is being utilized in the way that he should be best utilized, which is shoot threes, man. And 3 of 6, which is great, but I would like to see his attempts, if the Heat genuinely want to have a shot at this, and if they can keep him in there without getting into foul trouble, 8 to 10 attempts. Because they need a couple extra of those bombs to go in, I think, for their overall psyche, and B, just for the score, obviously. But yeah, the future is bright for Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero. And for any free agents that is out there looking at what potential teams that they would want to join, the Heat situation is looking pretty choice right now. I would imagine, they're not going to be making any crazy moves in the offseason to hamstring them when it comes to the cap, because they're by rights going to make a run at Giannis and Kawhi, and if you want Paul George, they'll be available after next season, and there'll be other guys on the market as well. So they'll have the cap space, and they'll be, it's no state tax, I believe, in Florida. I know Texas doesn't have a state tax, but I'm pretty sure Florida doesn't have it as well. So you're paying less in taxes for every home game, which, if you don't know out there, you pay taxes on. So if you're based out of Florida, right, or Texas, I know Texas doesn't have the state tax, and then you go and play a game at the Nets, you're paying the taxes within that state to play that game. So you're getting dinged for that. So if you're in a state like, California here, Los Angeles, you're paying somewhere in the ballpark of like 13% in state taxes every time you play a home game here. And then you're paying taxes on any time you play a game anywhere else, so long as they have state taxes. And then there's city taxes on top of that. Like in New York, I'd be curious, I don't know off the top of my head, as to whether or not there's state taxes plus city taxes, but I would assume that there is. So the allure of Miami with no state taxes, with this young core of super interesting guys and the ability to fill in, the blanks around it, and Jimmy there, and so long as you buy into the ethos of the team, it could be a hell of a destination. Evan Zoller over in the chat writes, MVP is LeBron, right? Other pundits trying to make a case for AD, but I think they hope to diminish LeBron's playoff run. If AD hadn't had a bad game in game 3 and they lost, I think you'd have a better choice. The narrative is LeBron's. So just like the regular season, once the narrative begins, it's tough to shift away from that. So at this point, I can't really, it'd be difficult for AD to get it unless in game 5, he put up just a monster of a game and LeBron no-showed and they still won. So LeBron has like a terrible shooting night and he only gets 12 points and he doesn't even crack a double-double with rebounds and assists, and AD puts up 45 and 12 and 9 or something ridiculous like that, and he throws in a 3 more block kind of night. He could steal it, but it would take a Herculean effort from AD at this point, and I think it's LeBron's to lose. So LeBron will be, first-time finals MVP for 3 different teams, winning a championship for 3 different teams, and suddenly making the discussion for GOAT all the more interesting. So we'll see. We still have game 5 on Friday, and the Heat, look, I think best case is Heat wins that and we get a game 6 on Sunday. I just don't foresee Dragic tried to go out there and test his foot before the game started. And it seemed like he was fine on the shooting. And then once it switched over to defense and he had to shift around, that's when they stopped the drills and he went and sat back down and eventually went into the locker room and changed and was a DNP. So the Heat need another game like game 3 where one of the two superstars has a bad game and everybody else is able to go off. But primarily they need AD to sit because his ability to shut down the paint or at least create a presence to where Jimmy doesn't want to drive is a more overbearing, domineering type of, I think, detriment to the psyche of the Heat overall, as opposed to LeBron at this point. Not saying LeBron's a bad defender, but you fear, given what the Heat do or what the Heat need to do in order to win, I think the presence of AD's defense over LeBron's has more of an impact. Just if guys are hesitant to drive, then they're relying entirely on their 3-point, and then the Lakers can shift out to their perimeter defense. And they have so much length on the wings, and overall, it's a really long team, except for the small ball iteration that played most of last night, which I think they need to continue with. You need to just not start Dwight and JaVale, go small early and bring Rondo in, because the on-off numbers with Rondo are through the first 3 games. I need to see the updated for last night, but they were staggering just how much of a positive he was on offense and defense. They were just, the team hums when he's out there. So perhaps do that from moment one. I don't know. We'll see. So Johanna writes, I haven't been able to watch games since they're on at 4 a.m. or really wanted to because my C's got eliminated. But has the series been even more than the 3-1 suggests, or is this all the Lakers show? I mean, game 1 was a blowout, straight up blowout. The Heat were never really in that. Mentally, they were checked out. Since then, game 2 was closer. I think the rebound disparity was a good indication, the second chance points and all that for the Lakers. Game 3 obviously went to the Heat, but last night, if the Heat hit a couple baskets in a key situation and maintained momentum, they could have won that game. Had they shifted momentum, because it was back and forth by and large throughout the entire game until the fourth quarter, late in the fourth. But the Lakers just continued to make a shot to maintain their lead when they needed to, and the Heat couldn't respond or return fire as often. And, it's a make or miss league, as cliched and stupid a thing as that is to say. So every time the Heat missed, it felt more like a dagger in the heart than it did for the Lakers. Now, that could be just because we all assumed the Lakers were going to win, so the Heat needed to make those. But I don't know. Even watching it, it felt like the Heat players needed those to go in just to maintain the overall momentum. So I think what you're assessing from afar, Johanna, is relatively accurate if you watch these games. But it hasn't been a complete, roughshod running over by the Lakers. Just the Heat are overmatched. It's the same thing I've been saying, and by and large, I'm sure a ton of other people have been saying, it's top 2 talent on the Lakers. You need to get one of those guys to no-show like they did in game 3, and then you got a real shot. Otherwise, it's those two, and you just need one other dude to step up, and it's been KCP a couple times, and then others to really jump in there. And Rondo, it's not like he fills up the stat sheet, but he gives them a steadiness on offense that they sorely lack. Johanna also writes, has losing a player won the MVP? Could Butler steal it? No. Had he maintained the momentum, like if last night, I told Fernandez on the show on Monday, I was like, I think the Heat have a shot to win by 2. And I really like late in that game, I was like, this very well could be coming true. I can't believe, I said that just kind of hoping it were true. Before the season or the series started, I picked Lakers in 6, and that was before Dragic went down, and then Adebayo halfway through game 1 and then missing game 2 and 3. And they still managed to get 1 without 2 of their best 3 players. And Adebayo was the best player against the Celtics. He was the leading scorer, rebounder, and assist getter in that series. So, to not have him, when Jimmy has a game 3 where he shoots over 70% from the floor, gets a triple-double, is lights out from everywhere, gets to the line a whole bunch, which he needs to do. And when people point out, like, his free throw rate is, I think during the regular season, it was a slight tick higher than Harden's. Why don't people ever break Jimmy's balls for, how many free throws he gets? It's the difference of between the two is Jimmy more so reminds me of AI, where he throws his body into that contact to try and make the bucket first and foremost, and then the foul is secondary. Whereas with Harden, the foul is primary, and getting the bucket is only icing on the cake. So I think Butler needs to do more of that. It's just drive. Even if AD is in there and you're fearful of the block, try and take the contact, A, to get the free throw, but B, the more important thing is to get AD into foul trouble, to get him on the bench. You need to do that to open up your offense, because then Hero will be less hesitant to drive to the lane. When he does, then the defense will have to collapse onto him. And now the Lakers are running around as you guys zing passes around the perimeter to find the best open shooter. Like last night when Jimmy caught that touch pass and whipped out to Crowder, the defense was already collapsing onto him. He cut down to the rim on the left side, jumped up, and his back was to the rim, but grabbed it and instantly threw it back out to Crowder. And that's, as soon as Crowder caught it, I knew it was going in. It's like, that's a Crowder shot. For as well as he shot from 3 in the playoffs, I love those from him where he barely has time to set, and it's purely in the rhythm of the offense if they're finding the open shooter. But if you can get AD out of there, it unlocks that aspect of the Heat's offense that they sorely need, which is just a little bit of chaos. They need a little chaos to get the Lakers over rotating, and then you can find an open shooter. And then if you have, if it's Jimmy crashing down there, and then on the wings, you've got Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero and Jay Crowder, and depending on what center they have in there, Bam can shoot the 3, but even if you have either of the backups in Olynyk or Myers Leonard, both shoot well from 3 for bigs. So you potentially surround Jimmy with 4 shooters if you can get into that type of situation. Johnny Shoemaker says, I agree that won't happen, though. Oh, he's responding to the chat overall, so I don't know where the chat. And then Evan Zoller, Matt, what do you think of free agency offseason coming up? Not a big free agent class, not a great draft. Can the Lakers make some changes without much or any draft capital? Well, they don't have. Are you saying that because they don't have much draft capital, can they make changes? Well, they can always get the mid-level guys that want to make a championship run, and they'll be able to retain certain guys, and other guys will move on. It'll be interesting to see who they feel is important to their team going forward. Like certain guys, Jared Dudley, who cares? He, by his own admission, Dudley joined this team to better enable him getting a coaching or front office job in the future, because now he has it on his resume that he played with LeBron James and potentially won a championship with it. And he's been around that type of high level player, and now he's bounced around the league, and he's been in a bunch of different systems, and he's seen all kinds of various, schemes and whatnot. So he knows the league inside and out, and he's trying to get a future coaching job. Smart move by Dudley. I wonder if his previous history of in essence, telling it like it is in podcasts and interviews will hurt him. I don't know. Only time will tell. Evan Zoller says, Danny Green gone, please. I mean, Danny Green, it's just so crazy. Every time he shoots now, I assume it's a miss. That's crazy. Danny Green was good at two things, and one was trailing off, which is perimeter defense. But it wasn't like he's, atrocious. Like you can't have him out there type of bad defense. He's just slowing down. He's getting older. So you kept him out there for his 3-point shooting. And now in the playoffs, man, it's every time he shoots, you're like, that's not going in. It's surprising when it does. It's just so bizarre to see a guy that you thought 38 to 40% of the time was going in. So you had a general feeling of that's money. Even when it was out, like when it rims out now, that is as good as a make for Danny Green. It's so weird to watch. It's just like it rims out and be like, can we give him like a half point for that? Can we something? He needs it. Whereas last year with the Raptors or with the Spurs before, that was the, when he goes 4 of 10 for a night, he had 2 rim outs and he very easily could have been 6 of 10. And that was the consistent Danny Green type of stuff. And it's flip-flopped. So yeah, I think Danny Green will be gone. It's good to have that steady championship type of presence. They don't have much on the team. You got LeBron, you got Danny Green, you got Rondo. Weirdly, you have JaVale, but JaVale has earned that. And I believe off the top of my head, that's everybody on the team. But to have somebody out there that's played as a starter in championship in the previous years, played heavy minutes for a championship team and was a key cog. And when they picked him up, it's like, that's a solid pickup for them. He is everything they need, just steady veteran type of thing. I'd have to look at his contract. Didn't he sign a 2-year deal? Here, I'll look it up right now as we're talking. I thought he signed a 2-year deal with them. I could be wrong. It could have been a 1-year, but we will see. Yeah, so he's on the books, guaranteed for $15.365 next year. All right, so we have somebody I just now noticed that wanted to jump in on the chat. So I will send, it's Sebastian. Let's see if he wants to get in, and we'll close out with him. He's a Lakers fan. And then Johnny Shoemaker writes, between Zach LaVine, Chris Paul, and Bradley Beal, who would be the best fit with the current Lakers team? Well, none of them, because they don't have the assets to go out and get any of those guys. Just Bradley Beal, you're going to have to match salaries and give up. And they don't have anything to give up because they gave it all up for AD. Chris Paul, you're going to have to match salaries. And OKC, as much as they want to get off of that contract, they're going to want something in return. That's the reason they tanked with the Heat. The Heat felt that they were doing OKC a favor by taking that contract off. So they wanted their pick back that OKC already had. And OKC said, no. We're giving you a prime player, and you're also going to have to surrender more picks in order for us to do this. And I still think as much as OKC wants to get off, they'd also like to extract future assets out of somebody to do it. There have been rumors that the Bucks are going to make a run at him, and then within 2 days of that, I saw the rumors that the Bucks are not going to do that. But it'll be intriguing to see what the Bucks do, because they've got to you need to make a move now, but you also don't want to tank your flexibility with Giannis going forward. All right, let's bring on Lakers fan Sebastian. How are you, sir?
How's it going?
Good. How you feeling?
Pretty good. Not gonna get too cocky just yet, though. I won't have the full smile on my face until either Friday or Sunday, depending on how either of those games go. But we'll see.
Okay, so you're automatically saying it's not going to go to Tuesday.
There's no way. I mean, for it to go to Tuesday, Jimmy Butler would have to have a Game 3 performance the next 3 games consistently. At least have some of his teammates maybe carry more of the load. I mean, I don't know how much you got into this, but I personally think the difference between Game 3 and Game 4 for the Heat was, this could just me. I think putting Bam back in the rotation may have thrown some things off compared to maybe obviously some performance issues from some of their key players. I feel like Jimmy wasn't as confident in terms of going to the rim. He kept throwing it out to a lot of his guys versus just going for it, which kind of, I think was a little strange given his Game 3 performance. So, we'll see kind of, what Spo does to, switch things up, and see kind of Now if Bam is going to be back fully kind of in sort of the mix of things, maybe not fully, but at least going back in with more extended minutes, how that may affect the dynamic, and the rhythm of things. So we'll see.
I don't see it going to Tuesday either.
Yeah.
As much as I would love it to go to Tuesday, I just don't foresee how that's possible. They need to get one of your two bigs in foul trouble. As weird as it is, the Caruso running into AD last night, if I was a Heat fan, you don't want to cheer for a player to get hurt, but you're like, oh boy, I hope he tweaked his knee or something and he needs to go sit down, because to get him out of the game gives you guys a real shot. Him or LeBron.
Right.
Get AD out of there and now you can finish at the rim, or you get LeBron out of there and the Lakers offense isn't nearly as potent without him. But one of the two you need to get off the floor. So it's just, if I'm a Heat fan, I'm cheering for a shit game from one of the two bigs, and that's just not, it's not going to happen 2 straight games to enable a game 7. So
no, that's what happened in game 3. I mean, game 3 was just horrendous all around. AD with the turnovers, only I think 2 rebounds or however many it was, like the less than handful of rebounds. He had a bad game. LeBron too. So I think they need to pray for that basically on a night to night basis for these games if they want to push it to a 7 theoretically.
So in the chat they brought up who basically, it was a question of who you go get, but I think the more interesting question of who do you retain. Some guys you're stuck with, like Danny Green. You've got him for another year.
Man, yeah, I was going to ask you that too. I was actually going to bring something. I ask you, like, who do you think we go in the offseason? Like pieces we release. Like I think, like Dudley, Smith, all the people we brought in temporarily, I think are obviously going to be offloaded. It'll be interesting. I actually saw on Twitter that the Warriors might be pursuing Dwight for a big this offseason. So it'll be interesting to see if Lakers decide to either maybe bring him back, because I know he's on a minimum contract along with Rondo. It's funny, those two guys are on minimum contracts and yet have been producing more than Danny Green, for example, who's getting paid $15 million a year to just throw bricks. It's just like every time he throws a shot, I look away because I just don't want to see. I just feel like I already know the end result of the shot. So, I mean, in terms of who we retain, yeah, I think Danny obviously we might be stuck with. I think we might just have to, go another year until his contract. I think, it'll be interesting to see in terms of the bigs who we keep with Dwight, JaVale, maybe because I think we do need to have another big. We can't just only have AD. I would love to keep Dwight. I mean, I think this year was was his, I think, comeback in terms of, I was hesitant when he came back. I was like, how is this going to turn out? And honestly, This has been a redemption year for him in terms of his legacy, especially, more so if he wins the ring. I think this kind of, will definitely, make him a Hall of Famer, if not, if it hasn't already. His resume says that. So I don't know. I was going to ask you, like, who do you think we could even possibly get? I mean, Oladipo is, going to be in free agency. But obviously word is that he might be going to the Knicks with some possible trade deals going through that.
You guys don't have any assets to trade. So it's just going to be through free agency signings. And then you have under contract. I looked it up real quick. So obviously AD is your primary goal, but that's going to happen regardless. KCP has a player option for 8 and change next year. I don't know if he exercises that option or he decides to test free agency. It'll be interesting. He's a clutch client, so that may. But do the Lakers want to pay more than that 8 and change for KCP? I wouldn't. You got Danny Green next year under contract. Caruso, very cheap price, and Kuzma. So then after that, it's like, you'll have availability. You just won't have the cap flexibility to go out and do all that much. Like Dwight chose to join you guys in the hopes of getting one more decently large contract, which I don't know why you guys would do that. So I don't think you would retain Dwight. Dwight's looking for another payday, especially if you got a championship this year. Maybe not. I could be wrong, but it seems as though the reason he did that, to go to the Lakers this year was to rehabilitate his image, to enable him to go out and get another 3-year deal worth 15, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I think in terms of I think just position wise, I mean, we definitely need a shooter, right? I think that's something we definitely need. Yeah. KCP, especially after last night, who I think kind of was sort of the quote unquote MVP of that game. I think he's stepped up huge for us in this whole bubble. Him and Caruso have, I think, stepped up as shooters. I think they have better shooting percentages, from the arc than Danny Green. So I think they've definitely stepped up, but I think we need someone on a consistent basis who we can rely on, right? Obviously, someone like a Steph, but obviously there isn't really like many of those, all around in the league, but someone who, like a hero that we can constantly, count on for a three or from the arc. Yeah. So I think, that's kind of who we need. And, I don't know how we get that right through free agency, obviously, but, I was hoping, obviously for Bradley Beal, but I knew that wasn't realistic given kind of the cap space and
you can't
afford. Yeah.
We don't have the contracts to match up. You would need to get Washington to take back Danny Green and Kuzma. Kuzma, they might be in on just because it's a young guy, but you don't have the contracts. And then Rondo is a player option for next year for 2.8. If I'm Rondo, I want to stay, but I think that's too cheap a price given how important he's been to the team this playoff
He's come
run.
Through, man. Playoff run is a thing.
As much as he hates that nickname, it's legit, man. And he's worth more than 2.8 to them. Now, for another team, he might be only worth, $3 million. But for the Lakers, I think he's worth much more. And if you can tear up next year's and do another like 1-1, we'll give you a guaranteed of $5-6 million. I think that's entirely possible. But KCP, Rondo, and AD are your three big, two of which are player options. I would imagine Rondo opts out, and I'm kind of assuming KCP opts out as well.
Do you think we keep McGee then if Dwight maybe opts out to go for a larger contract somewhere else?
Let me look up his contract real quick.
I don't know the contract situations for some of our guys, since I know some of them are like on temp, like shorter deals.
Yeah, I know he's on a shorter deal. Whether or not it's he's guaranteed for 4.2 next year.
Okay.
So, and JaVale was good he was the primary starter until Dwight Howard just proved to be a little bit better. Any final thoughts for Game 5 on Friday, or Game 5 on Friday?
Game 5, I hope Vogel now, after all this, has kind of found his rhythm, especially the starting. I think not having Dwight in the starting for this and maybe putting Rondo in, I think that's, Rondo's been coming, through. So we'll see kind of, I think, I'm obviously hoping for a win. I hope the game's close versus kind of a blowout. I hope really the Heat kind of come through with some fire. We'll see how they change it up. We'll see, I know there was some criticism for Spoelstra for maybe not putting some people like Myers Leonard in, and some other key players from their Game 3 win. So we'll see maybe how he decides to change things up and how Bam maybe naturally flows into the rhythm of the game a little bit more, since I think maybe that could have thrown it off. And hopefully Jimmy, I think comes through, because I was kind of a little disappointed in Jimmy's performance this past game, after his huge kind of Game 3 rise. So
yeah, he's just been playing 45 minutes every night. So perhaps he was a little gassed last night. I don't know. But if there's any time to just say, fuck it, and I'm going to be gassed, it's the finals. I know he knows that. He's a hell of a competitor. I don't know. But anyway, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, Matt.
Enjoy your Game 5. And, hopefully you're disappointed when we get a Game 6.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. As long as we get the chip, that'll be satisfied either way. So, like you, I enjoy more NBA. So, yeah.
All right. Well, enjoy the game on Friday. And, I'll look for you in the chat on Friday.
All right. Sounds good. Later, Matt.
Later, bud. Fucking Laker fans, man. It's hard not to be envious of those pricks. Just been to 32 championships. And now it's like, I'm just focused on getting this chip. You're like, shut up. He's just gluttonous pricks. I wish my fandom was the same as yours, constantly in it. The woe is me when you haven't made the finals since Kobe's last win. It's just like, but you still have so many, and you're constantly in the playoffs and in the finals by and large. If you just look at the numbers, it's been a little bit of a dry spell, and you've had some weird lineups over the past decade. That being said, welcome to the rest of the NBA. So it's nice, it's nice to see the king suffering down with the peasants, with the rest of us peasants. All right. Well, that is it for today's Dropping Dimes. with these game 4, there's only so much you can talk about. I'm looking forward to game 5. And I will see you guys on Friday at usual noon start time. Thank you to everybody that joined us in the chat. And Beard of OM, I appreciate the sentiment over on the side that he's not a big basketball fan, but he likes the passion of this show. And, listen, we're all huge NBA fans that check in and do the chat and watch this with me and follow the show. If you watch it and you want to subscribe to the channel, I'd thoroughly appreciate it. And if you could leave a comment on the podcast app of your choice, that would really help just elevate the podcast feed up into various sports categories, and I'd thoroughly appreciate it. And that is it for today's Dropping Dimes. Thanks to everybody. Enjoy Game 5 out there, and I will see you guys Friday at noon, going live here Pacific Standard Time, as always. Until then, adios.